Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of The Doctor Will See You Now. This is one of those interviews that I have been trying to pin down for a good few months, and with one thing or another, it just wasn't happening. And then today, it's happening, and it brings me such tremendous pleasure to welcome Johann Thorsson into the consulting room. Welcome, Johann. How are you? Are you well?
I'm well, thank you. I had COVID last week.
No.
But it was like a cold. I've had 3 of those vaccinations everyone's raving about.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was like a cold. So I'm okay.
Yeah. Excellent. I'm very pleased to hear that you are beyond it now, and fingers crossed that since it has visited, maybe it won't visit again.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, we never know. But our conversation today will focus on this fine publication. So White Sands, published by Headshot Books, came out in September 2021. And can I say, viewers, if you like your crime fiction with a twist or a context that you're not expecting, then here's some very, very shady crime fiction for you. Highly recommended. I should say as well that you may have noticed from Johann's name, but Johann comes from one of my most favorite places in all the world, Iceland. And so, again, I always really enjoy meeting authors from other places. However, I loved what you did with your book, and you didn't directly take us to Iceland. And I'll come back and ask why you avoided doing that, why you avoided providing what we've come to really appreciate as Nordic noir.
Mm-hmm.
You've given us something deliciously dark, but slightly different, which is, again, really appreciate it when authors take the genre and just prove to us how flexible it can be. But this novel, if you could maybe start by telling us its journey. When did you begin it? Why did these ideas that came to you? And was it a project that came easily, or have you had to wrangle somewhat with this?
So the project has quite a history. I originally got the idea, I guess 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I read a book called Skull Sessions by an American named Daniel Hecht. I think that's his last name. Which is that's about a man with Tourette syndrome who has sort of latent superpowers that he's unaware of. However, when he's on his medication, he doesn't function as well as he should. Somehow out of that, the idea came for a schizophrenic man who, in the throes of schizophrenia, could see ghosts. And through this, he learned of a crime. A ghost tells him who committed the murder, what the crime was, and of course the police would never believe the man because he's schizophrenic. Says that a ghost sees it. From that, I started writing the story, and then I figured this character is very interesting, but he's not going to carry a whole book. This is not going to carry a book. So I decided maybe I need to introduce a policeman, a detective. I did, and John Dark, the protagonist in White Sands, sort of walked onto the scene complete and whole. And I realized that, okay, this is the main character. So while the idea was of a schizophrenic man who can talk to ghosts and solve murders, the book sort of ended up being John Dark's story with the character named Daniel, after Daniel Hecht, the author of Skull Session. John Dark sort of took over and became the main driver of the plot. An additional thing is that I started writing this in 2009. About the same time my wife was pregnant with our first child. Having a child does not free up a lot of time. And I realized that in order to write a book, I needed to learn how to write at all. So I started taking short story courses, and my instructors were very encouraging. They said, there's something there. I think there's talent. You should continue, which I did. I've had short stories in a number of places, both in English and Icelandic. I finished the book in Exeter in the beautiful UK. I was awarded a week's writing residency in Exeter, which I spent, I wrote during the day, and then I awarded myself with a trip to the pub for a roast and a pint.
Well deserved, well deserved. If the product of having that week away was being able to bring together these ideas, then I think you deserved every pint and every slice of roast beef that you could manage.
And I had a fantastic week in Exeter. It was the first time I was a writer and nothing else. There was no day job. There was no home responsibilities.
Did you in doing that, did you notice a difference in the way you could write and the approach you could take, even in that week, being away from all those other responsibilities and calls on your time?
Not directly, but I think sort of looking back on it, maybe thinking about nothing but this thing, I was able to carry more ideas in my head at once. Instead of just when you're stealing time at home and from work and from family, you carry maybe a chapter in your head at once. Here I was able to hold more of the book in my head at once, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just thinking, from an academic side, doing research, and if you have a research day, so you pick up the research, but then you have to go and the following days you do your teaching, you do your other things, and then you have to pick everything up again. It's not the same as if you've got a week where you can just concentrate and develop ideas and not have to put things away for a little bit. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying. So the week in Exeter, and how long was it before that week and then the book?
This was in the summer of 2019, which feels like it was a pandemic and a war ago.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's 10 years ago. But that summer, that week, I think it was early summer. I think it was May in Exeter. Yeah, that it was, I'd say instrumental, because that's when I was able to say, okay, this is done, and now I need to get it published and find an agent. Let's get this career rolling, I guess is what was the end product. And
then it came onto the shelves, and thank you for all your hard work and that determination. This is going to come into being. I'm always in awe of people who maybe don't give up on ideas, or however long it takes for a book to be. That it might not be a quick fix. It might not be, let's get this done in a year, but it's this idea of this book will take the time it needs, and then it will come forth.
Yeah, I mean, I can admit that it did take a lot of, it did take a force of motivation to get it done. I mean, I abandoned it in 2015 and 2016 and 2017 when it was structured totally differently. The chapters were arranged differently. There were interviews with John Dark interspersed in the chapters, in scenes where there's a shooting, without giving too much away about the book, there's a shooting involving John Dark where he's interviewed after. And in the original manuscript, that interview, post-shooting interview, was quite explicit and long. I split it up. It was like 7 chapters that broke up sort of the book. I threw them all away. I seriously abandoned not just the book, but the whole idea of writing at all. Just it doesn't make sense. No one's going to read this. No one's going to buy the book. It'll never be in bookstores. All these things. And it did take a bit of motivation, even corny motivations, self-help books and reading those quotes people post on Instagram. It did take quite a bit of allowing oneself to be motivated, because it's like motivation is like making your bed. You have to do it again and again and again and again and again. It's not just, you're not just motivated once and that's it.
Yeah.
And realizing that and reading other writers' struggles really helped. Like, there is no easy route. No one does this and just.
Yeah. And that discipline that says you just come and you write. You do the work. You come and you sit and you write. So the book is with us. And turning to the text, I was intrigued, even at the start, that you have a quote from The Fates of Men, the Exeter book. And it says, "To one it happens in the time of his youth, that his end becomes a woeful tribulation to men. The grey prowler on the moor, the wolf shall devour him, and his mother will mourn his death, which is beyond man's control." Already, it's grim, it's grisly, it's ghostly. Please, for those of us who don't know, where did you take this quote from? It's so powerful.
That's from Exeter. There's a book in Exeter that's from, I don't know, the 10th century or something. I guess I'm going to get a call from Exeter now. Ruining their famous cultural landmark. But there's a book in Exeter. It's a very old book. Part of the residency was a sort of visit through Exeter, and I got a look at the book, not the book itself, but a copy. I mean, It's a very old book, and that passage somehow stuck. I also wanted to put it in there as a way to thank the city of Exeter and the British Council, everyone who invited me and paid for the residency. But the quote is fully, it's not a throwaway quote. I mean, it does set sort of the tone. And after finishing the book and reading it again, you maybe realize what it's attributed to. Explaining that would ruin the plot. Yeah, but I used to think that quotes at the beginning of books were pointless and sort of snobbish, because people would always put the Bible or Shakespeare, something to show I am well read. I put the quote there just because it sounds cool, and from a book that's so old.
And isn't it beautiful though to think of those connections, links over the centuries? You know, you create a story and something that's been written so long ago, and there's a resonance there that just fits. And so, but how was it that you were in Exeter, and why? All these, is there such a thing as serendipity? Is it happenstance? The stars aligning, all that. I just love how things work and come together.
And I mean, just seeing, like you mentioned serendipity, just seeing the ad for the writing residency, I saw it on Iceland Noir's Facebook page and decided to apply, knowing that it would go to someone established. I don't even know why I applied. But that's where I saw it. I saw it on Iceland Noir's Facebook page.
Yeah, I don't believe in anything happens by chance. It's it's opportunities that we take. The book has been billed, people have talked about it, as a paranormal thriller. And I wonder whether you as the author approve of that genre positioning, or whether you might see your novel in a different way.
I think that's the perfect sort of designation for White Sands. It's paced as a thriller. It's not just one case that they're examining for a whole book and sort of get to ease back and think. There's a murder, and then just as they're getting started, there's another one, along with other threads. So I guess, and a certain time element. So it's definitely a thriller, and paranormal versus supernatural. I mean, yes, there's elements of these things in there. So I actually am quite fond of supernatural thriller. As I mean, it's also been discussed as being horror. I don't know. It could be if you lean into that, but paranormal thriller is probably the closest you can get.
I very much appreciated that sense of otherworldliness, you know, if we can call it that, and the notion of becoming aware. You know, not the idea of a character, you know, being fully formed as having those powers, shall we say, but the moments where those things happened. And I wondered, again, that conscious decision to you know, to create characters for whom being this way, if we can call it like that, wasn't something that they already knew or that they took for granted. And I wonder why you made that choice.
I guess you're meaning Daniel and his ability to see ghosts.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to treat these subjects in a sort of grown-up manner. No one. Okay, if I go on a date and the date tells me she can see ghosts, I would think she's a bit crazy. I just, you tend not to believe these things, but often in movies and TV shows, someone goes on a date and the date says, "I can see ghosts." Oh wow, really? I mean, they treat it like it's a thing, while in reality you would always go, "No, it's not a thing. It's not this way." And it's the same thing he does. He sort of doesn't believe them. Detective John Dark, when he's sort of being pressed against the realization that something supernatural might be going on, he too goes, "No, it can't be. This doesn't make sense. I mean, these things don't exist. Let's be real." And so it's born out of, I guess, a stubbornness. I don't like it in books and movies when something supernatural shows up and in 10 minutes, everyone just takes it as given. Yeah, okay, you can fly. I'm cool with that. It just doesn't.
Yeah. And
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and also what I think it does is that it keeps, you know, it keeps the narrative in the now, as it were, and we as readers can relate to that in a, I don't want to use the word realistic, but it seems to sit better, and I don't think it jars as much. You know, so yeah, I was just intrigued at why you chose to do it like that, and it makes really, really good sense as to, you know, as to that decision. Now, you do not set the book, although there is mention of Iceland, and I'd like to come back to that mention, but you don't set the book in Iceland, you set it somewhere in the States. And why? What took you to the States? First of all, why elsewhere? Why the States when, you know, there's a whole world out there to set a story in?
Partly, I think it's, well, in Iceland we don't have. So in the book, the detective's daughter is missing. This doesn't happen in Iceland. You can't have a person missing for that amount of time and no one having any idea where she is.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to pick a place where that can happen. The United States being number one. Also, we have sort of a culturally agreed idea of what the United States are. No matter where you live, whether you live in Iowa or London or Iceland, we have a cultural idea of what the United States is. And the book is sort of set in that culturally agreed upon big city in the US.
Mm.
No city is mentioned by name, but we know what the city looks like. We know what how the people sound and how everyone looks and what the cars look like, what a taxi looks like, what it is when you walk into a diner and order a slice of pizza. We know what these things look like. I don't have to describe them. So picking a sort of generic but culturally agreed upon place in the US makes the story flow. It's also sort of a hat tip to the movie Seven, which takes place clearly in the US, but it's never mentioned where. Mm-hmm. White Sands takes place in the same place.
And also there was another aspect of this that I love, how John Dark is described as dressing like a 1950s private investigator with that hat, the gabardine and the shoes, mm-hmm. You know, so that link back to that heritage of the dogged detective, and that very, very much being his character. But I know you are bound to have been asked this about John, and so forgive me if I ask as well. But that choice of saying, you know, because you said John came onto the scene fully formed, but John Dark is black, and you know, again, the times that we live in, where you know it's very important to be careful who and what we write. Did you have misgivings when this character arrived, or you know, thinking, oh, should I, as this white man, should I be creating this character, or were you able to easily move beyond that?
So there's many sort of ways to answer that question. COVID throw. The first was a sort of railing against everyone always by default being white. Mm-hmm. I started writing him as white, I think, and then said, no, I'll make him black. Not to have sort of a twisty reveal or anything, mm-hmm. but I just wanted there to be a point in the book where people realize, wait, he's black. I've been reading him as white. So the reader encounters in himself the default whiteness. All policemen are by default white until told otherwise. And then I hit the wall sort of, but I'm white. Why should I write a black man? Who am I to write a black man? And then I thought, it's okay if I write elves or spaceships and aliens. Everything's okay. But if I write a black man, I'm sort of out of bounds. And I thought, no, that's, it was just something I didn't accept, because accepting that means that we keep writing default white all the time. I'm also railing against that. I thought there's nothing going to be different from the way he solves the crime or encounters people unless it's explicitly racist. And so when it does happen, I try to do those things well, but overall, everything he's doing is the same as if he was white. So why not keep him black? I did have it sensitivity read. I'm not just writing something and throwing it out there. A friend in the US read it over, and especially the chapters where I do sort of speak about race, and he sent me some corrections, which I made.
How did you enjoy that process? You know, the being, you know, assisted by someone to, you know, enable to make your writing more authentic, shall we say?
Yes, I mean I sort of knew I was on the right track, but I wanted it to sound authentic. And he helped make sure it was authentic and that I did not. I mean, it's the book itself could come off. There was a danger that it came off the wrong way. I didn't think it would, and it doesn't. And that was made clear by the comments from from my friend. And I'm very happy. I mean, it was a fun process. It did open my eyes a little bit about how often everything is default white. Every book we read being a clear example.
Yeah, and again, I really appreciate the idea of you know, you presenting the reader with this. So all these way through these pages so far, who have you been seeing?
Mm-hmm.
Because let me tell you, actually, and I think that is a beautiful way to, you know, to make us take notice and see, you know, where do we sit with regards to default or privilege, and how, you know, yeah, we need to be more aware. So thank you again for doing that. I
mean, people have said that there's political things in the book, and people have said that I beat people over the head with the politics, which I can agree with. That's okay. I'm keeping it in there anyway. But the part where he's black, I don't think I'm beating people over the head with it. I just sort of allow them to realize how white we read things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I come back and say that idea of, you know, bringing politics into it. I often say it's one of the things that I really love about crime fiction, is that it's just a perfect vehicle to allow us to stop and think without feeling this is a lecture or a, you know, or a heavy book to read, but still being able to present ideas that we need to consider.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that, yeah, the wonders of crime fiction. Now, there's an element in it again that made me think of one of those aspects of life in the Western world, and perhaps elsewhere, but definitely in the Western world, that we have been blighted by for long enough, and in particular in the United States, and that is the role of Big Pharma. So the giant pharmaceutical companies, they are depicted in not a very positive way, shall we say. You could have chosen, again, I'm always intrigued by authors' choices. It could have been a different kind of organization that Daniel works for. Why that one?
I really don't know. It just came as I was writing. He's a programmer, and sometimes when you're writing, the thing just comes. You don't know from where. Gamma Pharmaceuticals just came from somewhere. I do have a master's degree in computational biology, which I guess helped there. But I didn't mean to sort of pick on Big Pharma, but if anyone can take it, it's Big Pharma.
Yeah, definitely. But again, you know, those pillars in contemporary society that might be seen as, you know, the structures that enslave us.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was really good use of that. And you've got, you know, Daniel is this expert programmer, and that was going to be one of my questions to you, is, you know, to what extent do you program? Do you enjoy programming? You know,
I used to. I'm better at other things than programming, and I don't. It's not my job today, but I know enough sort of to write a believable programmer. And he always had to be a programmer. He had to be a virtuoso something. Mm-hmm. That's again a sort of tribute to Daniel Hecht's Skull Session. He talks of sort of a virtuoso violinist who while on the Tourette's medication, isn't able to play or improvise as much as they used to. And that's sort of where I go with Daniel. He's a virtuoso programmer, except when he's on his schizophrenia medication. Then he's a so-so programmer.
And there's a way that he's described, and I loved it, the notion of the brilliance hiding in the mess.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me think of what we can often miss because of the way maybe we know a person and all that we don't know about them, that face value.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you never know the gifts and talents and abilities that people possess.
And also, I mean, it's also, imagine everything you could do if you were allowed to try everything. Maybe I'm a virtuoso violinist. I've never touched a violin.
Yeah. How do we get to discover what we might actually be just amazing if we've never had the opportunity or felt the inclination?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What goes? I don't know what goes unused, unrecognized. Deep question. You've set me off on a thought now. I'll come back to the novel, because there's a point quite early on in the novel where they mention the use of the reed technique in interrogation, and I wondered again how you came across that, and why it fitted in with the novel.
That's just pure luck, I guess. I wanted him to approach interrogation differently from everyone else, and sort of realizing that I didn't know anything about how the police conduct interrogations. I looked it up, and that reed interrogation technique is real. It's still used very widely. And the case I mentioned of its first time usage being a man who was convicted while innocent because he was forced into sort of admitting that he murdered his wife, but he never did. And sort of also in it, by the way, catching sort of the injustice of often these interrogations, especially for Black people. But I really liked both the research and sort of the writing of that, where you're writing about something that's real. It makes the book sound more authentic. It was very interesting. I mean, just reading about the reed technique, and that someone, of course, this is very American, was able to patent a technique for interrogating criminals, which is wildly unfair towards those being interrogated, this being a widely used practice, and that the first one was sort of imprisoned while innocent and later let go and paid money after he was unjustly convicted.
And yet it's interesting that the technique is still being used, even though the initial test of it was not a true. It didn't work as it should have worked.
No, I mean it's from the get-go. It's very unfair because it assumes whoever you're talking to is guilty. It's the opposite of what the justice
system. Yeah.
And so the interrogation, for those who don't know, the interrogation is conducted assuming the person is guilty, and you're just sort of trying to get them to admit to a tiny fraction of it. Let's say I accuse you of shoplifting. So while you're being interrogated, you were denied water and denied toilet breaks, and they're told you can go in just a while. But I mean, you really did want that TV, right? I mean, you like the TV, and if you admit to this, they're sort of on the track to get you to admit to having stolen it. Maybe you don't care about the TV at all because you were never even in the store where the crime happened, but you say, yeah, it was a fine TV. You're tired, hungry, you've been there for a long time. And that's sort of how it winds up. In the end, you're just, I took the TV, I just want to go home. Can I go home? Because you've been there for hours and hours and hours. And then they get convict you based on very unfair interrogation technique.
Yeah, I'm just gobsmacked at the idea of a process that works totally against the system, where it's the idea of, innocent until proven guilty, and this is, well, we need you to be guilty, so whether you are or whether you're not.
I mean, you can see it in two very popular TV shows, both Making a Murderer and the Central Park Five.
Oh, I don't know Central Park Five.
I don't think it was called Central Park Five. It was about the five boys who were in Central Park. There was
Yes.
a woman beaten and raped. And some of these five boys were imprisoned using the Reed technique to get them to admit to something. They were in the park. They saw a woman. Some of them admit to beating a woman. They were never close. They never did this.
Yeah.
Served years in jail and became, I mean, this ruins you as a person.
So whilst, you take us along various avenues, but I think this, this is, again, it's one of those real strong threads of the book that calls into question, the pillars on which, certain aspects of society are based. I wonder if I could ask you something, though, and come back to the process of the book, because there's in the acknowledgements at the end, you also thank your wife and you say, the tough love reading technique. Is your wife your greatest and best critic, do you think?
I think so. She doesn't, she gives no quarter. She will read something and say, this is bad, or why does this person keep doing this again and again? This is not how you spell this word. I mean, she will not, if I hand her something to read and she reads, she's never going to say, that's wonderful, well done. Even on the fifth pass, she'll find something and she'll tell me about it.
I love that support, because again, it's that sense of wanting you to be the best that you can be, even if it hurts sometimes. I thought this was amazing. It's like, no. And now, I mentioned that you do take us to Iceland at one point, but you take us back to the 1950s in Iceland. And again, did you need to include Iceland in this story, or was it, the love of your country that wanted you to bring this aspect in?
That's another thing, I guess, that just happened during writing. So the time period when this character is introduced in just very early 1950s, maybe late 1940s, it's following a time where Icelandic women were falling for British and American soldiers, handsome men in uniform. Even just talking to one could land you in a home here. So a woman seen talking to an American or British, it's British first because they were here first. The Americans came in the second part of World War II. So even just talking to an American was indecent, and a woman could be charged and sent to a home, which was, terrible, terrible homes out in the country.
Yeah.
That it's another thing that's just so unfair, and a sort of black spot on our treatment of women, of which there are enough black spots to go around. I just sort of ended up including it because it fit in the bleak worldview of the book. It gave me a reason for an Icelandic woman to end up in the United States. And I don't think Iceland should get off as a wonderful, peaceful country with roses and pretty landscapes without telling people about some of the shitty stuff that happened.
I think, and personally, I recognize, that these things happened. But I think for somebody who Iceland may be seen as this, this idyllic place, because I think we need those perfect places, you know, when maybe our own, you know, experience or our own nations aren't as good as we wish they should or could be. But you know, you do right. No place is perfect, and you know, to be able, I think, to, you know, to recognize that this wasn't right or this isn't right, and what can, you know, what can be done. I think to shed a spotlight on, you know, on the not so good aspects of our society, past and present. It is important.
Yeah, very much so, I think.
Yeah. Now, I wonder, the novel seems to end posing a very, very big, hard question. Two questions then. Please tell me this isn't the only John Dark novel. And secondly, will the end of this, that doesn't seem to be an end, will it have an end, a tidy closure at another point?
It might. There is how to be vague enough. There is. I'm writing another John Dark book. There is a reason to, if that's vague enough. Hopefully there'll be 3 total John Dark books. I don't know if I can be more precise than that.
I think that's beautiful. That is great. That fills me, you know, with hope, because I think the world that you've created and around John, Daniel, you know, that it should remain in one book, would sadden me. I mean, sometimes it has to be, doesn't it? That, you know, a standalone, a gem in itself. But I think there's so much more that I would like to know and like to see. And can you reassure us that, having said this, that your process won't be as long with the next one?
Oh, I can promise that.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Just to come back into the book, John has a work partner, Monique. And again, I wonder, you know, if you could whet our appetites to tell us, what is this partnership like on the job? How do they function together?
Well, in the book, they function like my idea of partners in the police. I've never never worked in the police. I don't know how they actually work. But I, again, am writing in the sort of agreed cultural idea we have of how these things work. So they are friendly, maybe not friends. They work off each other's strengths, while being fully aware of each other's weaknesses. And as cop shows and movies have taught us, they have each other's back no matter what. And I think that sort of describes their relationship. They're not meeting outside of work for any reason, but while on the job, they are friendly.
And again, you know, as you say, it's the idea of they know each other. Things have happened, but they are still working together, and there's a strength in that working together. I enjoyed that partnership with its strengths and weaknesses, or its flaws. Yeah. Now, I wonder if we might close with this, just again to you know, just to say to readers, let's intrigue you and let's get you into this. John is called to a crime scene pretty at the start of the book. Could you describe what it is that he finds at the crime scene?
Okay, yeah. At the crime scene, they're called to, which is The first homicide scene he's been to in 2 years, because he ruined his career, sort of. So his daughter is missing. He frantically sort of looked for her 2 years ago, breaking every code in the police handbook, abusing all his power and contacts, and was demoted. And so at the beginning of the book, he's for the first time back in the homicide side of things. So they are called to a house where a man has murdered his wife. And early on, they're walking in the house before they've seen the body, and they notice there's a lot of branches and leaves on the ground in the house. And so they ask an officer what's with all the branches and leaves. And the officer is taken aback and says, "Oh, you haven't seen the body?" And so they walk upstairs, open the bedroom door, and the wife is laid out on the bed. And branches and trees have been arranged out of her head, up across the bed and up the wall to sort of resemble giant antlers. But her hair is combed back. She's laid out beautifully. It's almost like she's asleep. Apart from the stab wounds. So the scene is quite grisly. It's been meticulously made up. It's been, the antlers have been nailed against the wall. It's clearly taken a lot of time, and yet the body is nearly undisturbed. So it's like a pristine sort of murder scene.
It took my breath away, because it was, again, your imagination and the scene that you create, something that we don't often see, and it brought back as well, for me, there were hints of like Celtic folklore, with the idea of the deer's antlers, obviously, the various goddesses from the past. So yeah, it made me think of that.
It's and readers get to know in as they read the book why the bodies have been arranged this way, why the killer makes them look pretty after death. And it's also, I mean, I'm not shy with sort of talking about where I get inspiration from. That's clearly inspired by the first scenes in True Detective.
So drawing on different cultural productions, books, and TV series, is it important for you, and evidently it is, for those to pull on those threads and make those threads your own? Do you enjoy that sort of like, do you spend a lot of time watching series? Do you, are you in to reading other works?
I do it, I think, quite differently from other people. I don't try to read everything that's out there. I will read a lot, and then I come across something like this, and I will read it again and again and again and again. True Detective season 1, I've seen, I don't know how many times. I watched the season probably 7 or 8 times the whole way through. The movie 7, I'll watch again and again. And I'll put in things that are like a thank you or a love letter to these things. Chapters sometimes begin the same way as a chapter from a favorite book. There's details in phrasing that people can pick up that are from lyrics. There's at the end of White Sands, there's a big homage to Where the Wild Roses Grow, the Nick Cave song. There's an homage to James Joyce's The Dead. At the very end of The Dead, he uses the phrase faintly falling and falling faintly to describe the snow. And I use that almost exact same phrasing to describe the rain in the woods. the way the rain sounds on the leaves as they're falling. I'll put these things, I mean, they're in almost every chapter. There's something that's a love letter to another TV show or a book. All of it.
Beautiful. Johann, thank you for spending time with us. This has clearly been a labor of love, and a labor that could have been left and we would never have known. So it's an absolute thrill to know that this is now with us and that there is more on the way. All the very best, and I look forward to an opportunity of, if possible, of doing this in real life. I'd love it if you were able to come to Newcastle Noir and talk to us about your work there. So if we can talk about those possibilities at another point, would that be okay?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Wonderful. But for now, I'll wish you all the very best and see you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
A pleasure. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.